The crystalline walls of the Grand Assembly Hall stretched upward into infinite darkness. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood alone in the center of a glowing circle, surrounded by emptiness. Above him, arranged in ascending tiers that seemed to reach the stars themselves, sat representatives from 473 alien civilizations. The air hummed with translation fields converting thousands of languages into coherent sound. Marcus felt every eye upon him. Some were compound eyes that reflected light in rainbow patterns. Others glowed with internal fire. A few were not eyes at all, but sensory organs humanity had no names for. All of them watched the single human standing in judgment. Supreme Arbiter Thelnora spoke first. Her body was made of flowing silver that moved like liquid metal. Her species had maintained galactic law for 12 millennia. When she spoke, the sound resonated through bone and soul. The Terran species stands accused of the gravest crime known to civilized space. Ambassador Webb, your planet has harbored the fugitive known as Witness Kale for 7 months. You have ignored 17 official demands for his extradition. You have violated Compact Law Section 4, Subsection 12. Holographic images materialized around Marcus. Security footage showed a damaged shuttle landing in white snow. Thermal scans revealed a hidden facility carved into ice. Intercepted communications played in dozens of alien voices. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The penalty for this violation is planetary quarantine, Thelnora continued. Her silver form solidified into something harder and more threatening. For 10 standard cycles, Earth will be isolated from all galactic civilization. Your hyperspace beacons will be deactivated. Your trading rights will be revoked. Your embassy will be closed. Your people will return to the darkness from which they emerged only 20 years ago. Murmurs rippled through the assembled species, like waves across an ocean. Some sounded satisfied with this judgment. Others seemed uncertain. A handful of species who had established profitable trade relationships with Earth looked distinctly uncomfortable. Counselor Vexthar leaned forward from his elevated position. He was massive and reptilian with crimson scales that caught the light. His species had been council enforcers for 3,000 years. The quarantine is merciful, human. We could have chosen military enforcement instead. I suggest you accept this judgment with gratitude and choose your next words with extreme care. Marcus had stood perfectly still throughout the entire presentation. His hands remained clasped behind his back. His gray diplomatic suit was immaculate. His face showed nothing but calm professionalism. Now finally he moved. He took one step forward. That single step somehow commanded the attention of every being in the vast chamber. The murmuring stopped. The translation field seemed to pulse with anticipation. When Marcus spoke, his voice was calm and measured and carried the weight of absolute certainty. No. The word hung in the air like a physical object. Shock rippled through the assembled council members. In 3,000 years of recorded galactic history, no species had simply refused a council judgment. Certainly not a species as young and insignificant as humanity. Thelnora's silver form flickered with what might have been confusion or anger. I beg your pardon? I said no. Marcus looked up at the tiers of alien dignitaries. His gaze swept across them methodically, meeting whatever passed for eyes in hundreds of different species. Humanity will not surrender, Witness Kale. We will not accept your quarantine. We will not bow to your authority. And as of this moment, Earth formally withdraws from the Galactic Compact. The chamber exploded into chaos. Voices in 100 different languages shouted over the translation fields. Security drones activated throughout the hall, their weapons charging with high-pitched whines. Vexthar rose to his full, towering height, his massive body trembling with rage. You dare to defy this council? He roared. Marcus cut him off before he could continue. 7 months ago, a small shuttle crashed through 2 kilometers of Antarctic ice during the worst blizzard Earth has experienced in recorded history. Inside that shuttle was a single survivor. He was dying, frozen, terrified. He managed to speak 3 words before losing consciousness. Our translators worked for hours to understand those words. The shouting in the chamber began to quiet. Curiosity was replacing outrage. Marcus had their attention now. Those 3 words were simple, Marcus continued. They are killing everyone. He let that statement settle over the assembly. The silence was now complete. Even the security drones seemed to pause in their targeting protocols. "For 7 months, we have protected this survivor," Marcus said. "For 7 months, we have listened to his testimony. We have verified his claims. We have investigated his evidence. And 3 days ago, we finally understood the complete truth of what he was telling us." Marcus reached slowly into his jacket. Every weapon in the chamber locked onto him instantly. Red targeting lasers danced across his chest from a dozen different angles. He moved with deliberate care, withdrawing not a weapon but a small data storage device. He held it up for all to see. "This contains the complete testimony of witness Kale. It contains documented evidence of what the Galactic Council has been doing for 3,000 years. It contains the truth about the Scourge Wars. It contains proof of the natural plague that supposedly wiped out the Torvan civilization. It contains documentation of the accidents that destroyed 17 colony worlds across 4 sectors. It contains irrefutable evidence that this council does not govern the galaxy. This council calls it." The silence was now absolute and suffocating. Not a single being in the vast chamber made a sound. Even the translation fields seemed to hold their breath. Thelnora's silver body had gone completely rigid. "You do not understand what you are speaking of, human. Do I not?" Marcus smiled, and there was nothing friendly in that expression. "Witness Kyle was not just any fugitive. He was your auditor, one of the beings who verified which species were growing too aggressive, which civilizations were becoming too numerous, which cultures were advancing too quickly. He signed the execution orders. He verified the targets. He watched as 17 civilizations were systematically eliminated. And then he discovered something that made him risk everything to warn us." Marcus turned slowly, addressing not just the council members but the viewing galleries that surrounded the upper levels. Thousands of journalists, observers, and representatives from minor species without council votes watched from those galleries. His next words were for them. Kyle discovered that humanity had just been added to the termination list. In 6 months, a carefully engineered plague was scheduled for release in Earth's oceans. Within 2 years, our population would have dropped from 8 billion to less than 10 million. The survivors would have been integrated into the compact as a grateful servitor species, forever thankful that the wise council had rescued them from extinction. Marcus held up the data device again. "But here is what makes this particularly interesting, counselors. The information on this device is not unique. Copies have already been distributed to every major independent news network in the galaxy. To every world that your council considers too minor or too primitive to have a vote. To every species that has ever wondered why some civilizations thrive while others mysteriously collapse. By my estimate, approximately 3 billion beings across the galaxy are learning the truth right now." Vexthar's hand moved toward a control panel on his console. Marcus saw the movement and his smile grew wider and colder. "Please, Counselor, go ahead. Give the order to destroy Earth. Show every watching species that Kale was absolutely right. Demonstrate that any civilization which learns the truth about your genocidal protocols must be immediately eliminated. Prove to the galaxy that you are exactly what we are accusing you of being." "This is impossible," Vexthar hissed. "Your species has only been space-capable for a few decades. You have perhaps 70 ships, no weapons beyond conventional missiles, no defensive grid capable of stopping even a small enforcement fleet. You cannot threaten us." "Cannot?" Marcus interrupted quietly. "We have had 7 months to prepare, Counselor. 7 months since that frozen night in Antarctica when we realized what Kale was truly telling us. 7 months since we understood that our choice was not between cooperation and isolation. Our real choice was between submission and extinction." His voice dropped even lower, forcing the entire assembly to strain to hear him. "Humanity has chosen a third option." The holographic displays around Marcus suddenly changed. They no longer showed evidence of Kale's refuge on Earth. Instead, they showed humanity's home planet in real time. But this was not the Earth that Council intelligence had been monitoring. This Earth was ringed with massive orbital weapons platforms. Ships bearing the insignia of a Terra Defense Force emerged from hidden facilities on the Moon. Similar installations were visible on Mars, on the moons of Jupiter, on Saturn's rings, and in the distant reaches of the outer solar system. All of them were powering up. All of them were armed with weapons the Council had never seen before. "For 7 months," Marcus said softly, Humanity has done what we do best when faced with extinction. We have innovated. 7 months earlier, the blizzard had been raging for 3 straight days. Director Rachel Torres ran through the corridors of Amundsen Scott Station, her breath visible in air that the heating system struggled to keep above freezing. Behind her, astrophysicist David Park and Security Chief Lieutenant James Holland fought to match her pace. "Please tell me this is just another meteor," Rachel shouted over the howling wind that penetrated even these heavily insulated walls. "Negative on that," David called back, clutching his data tablet against his chest. "The trajectory is all wrong. The deceleration pattern suggests controlled descent. Rachel, something is trying to land out there." They burst into the monitoring station where technicians huddled around glowing screens. The storm made visual confirmation impossible, but radar told a clear story. An object roughly the size of a small aircraft was descending rapidly through impossible weather conditions. "Where will it impact?" James demanded, his military training taking over. 17 kilometers north-northeast, a technician replied without looking up from her console. "Impact in 40 seconds based on current descent rate." Everyone in the room fell silent as they watched the radar blip descend. It wobbled. It fought against winds that were tearing apart the upper atmosphere. And then suddenly it vanished from their screens. "Crash landing," David whispered. It went down hard. Rachel was already moving toward the equipment lockers. "James, get the snowcats ready. David, find Dr. Lin and bring her to the garage. If that is what I think it is, we are about to make first contact with something that definitely did not come from Earth." "In this storm?" James protested, following her anyway. "Rachel, visibility is 0. The temperature is minus 70 Celsius. We would be risking our lives for something that might already be dead." 17 kilometers, Rachel interrupted, pulling on her Arctic survival gear. Whatever just crashed out there had the entire planet to choose from. It could have landed anywhere, near any major city, near any military base, near any government facility, but it chose here. The most remote, the most isolated, the most difficult to reach scientific station on Earth. She looked at James with fierce determination. That is not random. That is desperation. The journey through the storm took 6 brutal hours. The snowcats crawled through ice and darkness, their searchlights barely penetrating 5 meters ahead. Twice David thought they had lost the GPS coordinates completely. But Rachel pushed forward with the same stubborn determination that had made her the youngest director in Antarctic research history. They found the craft embedded in a deep crevasse, its hull already half buried by relentless snow. The hull itself was strange beyond description. It seemed to shimmer between colors that should not exist in nature. The metal, if it was metal, appeared to be dying. Whatever powered the craft was flickering, generating sporadic bursts of heat that created bizarre steam patterns in the frozen air. James immediately set up a defensive perimeter out of pure instinct, while David took readings with every instrument they had brought. Dr. Lin, a xenobiologist who had spent her entire career preparing for a moment she never truly believed would arrive, simply stood and stared. "It is real," she whispered to no one in particular. "Can we get inside?" Rachel asked, always practical. David shook his head. "Not without cutting tools, and that might damage whatever is inside or trigger some kind of security system or even cause an explosion. We should wait for better equipment and more personnel." The ship's hull suddenly rippled like water. A section dilated open like a living iris. Heat poured out along with air that made their instruments scream with readings of nitrogen and oxygen mixed with chemical compounds that had no names in any Earth database. And then something crawled out into the storm. It was vaguely humanoid in the same way that a statue is vaguely human. Its skin, if skin was the correct term, looked like living glass, translucent. Internal structures that might have been organs or might have been technology were visible beneath the surface. It had 4 arms, but 2 of them dragged uselessly behind it. One leg was bent at an angle that suggested it was badly broken. Its head was triangular and appeared to have no eyes, but it turned directly toward the humans with an awareness that needed no vision. The alien collapsed into the snow. Dr. Lin moved before anyone could stop her. She was kneeling beside the dying creature, her medical scanner already out. Her hands steady despite the absolute impossibility of what she was doing. Multiple system failures, she announced in her clinical voice, the one she used when emotions would only get in the way. Whatever this being's physiology is, it was not designed for Earth's atmosphere or temperature. It is dying fast. The alien's head moved again, turning toward Rachel with what felt like desperate intention. Its mouth, a vertical slit running down the center of its face, opened. Sounds emerged. Not words. Not anything human ears were designed to interpret. Just sounds that somehow carried the weight of terrible urgency. David was recording everything, his translation software working frantically to find patterns. "I am getting fragments," he said. "Nothing coherent yet. The language structure is completely alien. Wait!" He looked up, his face pale even in the storm's darkness. 3 words just repeated with high-confidence translation. "What words?" Rachel demanded. David's voice shook as he answered. "They are killing everyone. They got the alien back to the station. It took all of them working together to lift the being into one of the snowcats. Dr. Lin set up an emergency isolation chamber, flooding it with an artificial atmosphere based on readings from the crashed ship. She worked for 30 straight hours, using medical techniques that were half emergency field surgery and half educated guessing about alien biology. The alien survived. Barely. Over the following weeks, as the storm finally cleared and Antarctic summer began its brief appearance, the alien slowly recovered enough to communicate. The translation systems improved gradually. What had been incomprehensible sounds became fragments of meaning, then sentences, then complete concepts that changed everything humanity thought it knew about the universe. The alien's name was Kale. His species was called the Veilnoth. They served as auditors and record keepers for something called the Galactic Council. Kale had held his position for 47 Earth years. His specific function had been oversight of population management protocols. Rachel assembled a carefully vetted team. Scientists she trusted, military officers with top security clearances, government officials who understood the magnitude of what they were dealing with. For 6 months, they worked in absolute secrecy, listening to Kale's testimony, learning about a galaxy filled with intelligent life, learning about humanity's first contact that had occurred 7 months before public announcement, trade delegations approaching Earth's newly formed world government with offers of membership in something called the Compact, learning about the horror that lurked beneath that friendly exterior. "The Council has rules," Kale explained one evening, his voice coming through translation speakers surrounding the isolation chamber. His health had improved enough for sustained consciousness, though he would never fully recover. A species cannot grow too large, cannot innovate too rapidly, cannot possess certain aggressive tendencies. "Define aggressive," Rachel said carefully, though she already suspected the answer. Kale's eyeless head turned toward her with uncanny precision. "Species that wage war against each other, that compete instead of cooperate, that question central authority, that resist cultural integration into established norms." The room went very quiet. Every human present understood what that meant. "What happens to species that break these rules?" David asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Management," Kale replied with terrible simplicity. "Sometimes economic pressure, sometimes political manipulation, sometimes biological intervention." Dr. Lin's face lost all color. "You mean plague?" "Engineered disease, precisely targeted genetic weapons," Kale confirmed. "Designed to reduce population to manageable levels while appearing to be natural outbreaks. The Torvan civilization collapsed from what their own scientists identified as an autoimmune pandemic. The Kreshvor from a respiratory virus. The Gentari from crop failures caused by a fungal bloom that coincidentally affected only their 3 primary food sources." "How many?" James asked, his hand unconsciously moving toward where his sidearm would normally rest. 17 complete extinctions in the past 3,000 years. 42 limited interventions that reduced populations to compliance levels. Hundreds of economic manipulations designed to prevent certain species from achieving full industrial capacity. Rachel stepped forward, her voice steady despite the horror she felt building inside. "And humanity?" Kale went completely still for a long moment. "Your species was added to the review list 3 months before I fled. The Council designation is Category 5, Aggressive Expansion, Rapid Technological Advancement. Cultural resistance to centralized authority. High reproduction rate. Humanity meets all 5 criteria for immediate intervention. When? Rachel's voice was barely audible now. The biological weapon is already in production. Standard protocols allow 6 months for design, 3 months for testing, 3 months for distribution network establishment. The meeting room, deep beneath the Pentagon, was designed to survive nuclear war. Today, it held representatives from every major world government, military leaders from a dozen nations, and scientists who had spent the past 5 months working in absolute secrecy. At the head of the table sat Rachel Torres, looking exhausted but determined. "We have 1 month left," she began without preamble. 1 month before the Council's biological weapon is scheduled for deployment. 1 month before they demand Kale's extradition through official channels. 1 month to finish what we have started. General Holland pulled up holographic displays showing Earth's defensive preparations. The orbital weapons platforms are 70% complete. We have converted 40 civilian vessels into military craft using the technology Kale provided. Another 35 are under construction in the lunar shipyards. Mars base is operational. The outer system installations are behind schedule but functional. "It is not enough," a Chinese admiral said bluntly. "The Council has thousands of ships. We have dozens. Even with superior technology, the numbers are impossible. Which is why we are not going to fight them ship to ship," Rachel replied. She pulled up new data, and the room fell silent as people absorbed what they were seeing. "This is everything Kale gave us about Council operations. Their fleet coordination protocols, their communication networks, their command structure, and most importantly, the complete records of their population management program." Ambassador Webb, who had been selected to represent Earth at the upcoming Council confrontation, leaned forward. "You want to expose them?" "I want to destroy them," Rachel corrected. "Not militarily. We cannot win that fight, but politically, socially, morally, the Council has built 3,000 years of authority on a lie. They present themselves as benevolent governors maintaining stability, but 43 current Council member species were themselves targets of intervention programs. They were broken, reshaped, modified genetically and culturally until they became compliant servants instead of independent civilizations. Dr. Lin added to the explanation. "We have verified Kale's data. The genetic markers are there. The historical records show discontinuities where entire cultural periods simply vanished. The Council did not just kill 17 civilizations. They enslaved 43 others and made them forget they were ever free. If we release this information," David Park continued, "if every species learns what was done to them, the Council will not just lose authority. It will collapse from within. Member species will rebel. The systems of control that took 3 millennia to build will shatter. But they will still send the fleet," a European defense minister pointed out. "Even if we expose their crimes, they will come to silence us before the revelation spreads too far." "Then we make sure it spreads faster than they can respond," Marcus Webb said quietly. "We time the release for maximum impact. We force them to choose between crushing Earth publicly, which validates everything we are saying, or backing down and admitting weakness." James Holland shook his head. "They will choose to crush us. An empire does not survive 3,000 years by showing weakness. They will come with everything they have." "Which is where this comes in," Rachel said, pulling up new images. They showed a structure buried deep beneath Antarctic ice. Massive, ancient, definitely not human. "Kale told us about this 3 months ago. We only recently broke through to it. He calls it a precursor installation." The room erupted with questions. Rachel held up her hand for silence. "Before the Council existed, there was another civilization. The precursors. They disappeared over 50,000 years ago. They left installations scattered across the galaxy, including one on Earth. The Council has spent 3,000 years suppressing all evidence of them." "Why?" someone asked. "Because the precursors had a different philosophy," Dr. Lin explained. "They believed younger species should be helped, not controlled. Their technology was designed to amplify adaptive capabilities, to help civilizations survive and thrive." She paused. "This installation is a defense platform. It has been dormant for 50 millennia, but we have been working on reactivation." Marcus looked at the structure with growing understanding. "How powerful?" Theoretical calculations suggest it could generate destructive force equivalent to a star-going supernova, David said. It manipulates space-time itself. It operates on principles we barely understand even with Kale's help. Can we control it? Holland demanded. Kyle can, Rachel replied. The interface requires a neural architecture humans do not possess. But his species, the Velnoth, their crystalline neurology is compatible. She paused, and everyone in the room heard what she was not saying. What is the cost? Marcus asked quietly. The platform was designed for a crew of hundreds, Dr. Lin said, her voice heavy. One operator attempting to run all systems simultaneously would not survive the neural feedback. The power requirements alone would burn out his biological systems within minutes. Silence filled the underground room. They were discussing asking a being who had already risked everything for them to make one final sacrifice. Does Kale know? Someone asked. He knows, Rachel confirmed. He volunteered. He says it is his atonement for 47 years of signing execution orders. He wants this to be his choice. General Holland stood and walked to the holographic display of the precursor installation. If he does this, if he activates the platform at full power during a council attack, what are our chances? David ran calculations on his tablet. With the platform operational, with our defensive grid, with the fleet we have built, and with the council's systems disrupted by the information release causing internal chaos? He looked up. We might actually survive. It would still be the longest shot in human history, but we would have a chance. Then we proceed, Marcus said firmly. We prepare the information release. We coordinate the timing with my appearance before the council, and we make ready to defend Earth against whatever they send. He looked at each person in the room. In 1 month, humanity either earns its place in the galaxy as a free species, or we die fighting. I know which option I prefer. Over the next 4 weeks, the pace of preparation became frantic. Ships rolled out of lunar construction facilities at a rate that should have been impossible. Weapons platforms took position in orbit. Scientists worked with Kale to understand the precursor installation enough to activate it without destroying half the continent. The data package was prepared with meticulous care. Every piece of evidence verified, every authentication code checked, every distribution network tested. When it was released, it would reach billions of beings simultaneously across the galaxy. There would be no way for the Council to suppress it. Marcus rehearsed his statement to the Council hundreds of times. Every word was chosen for maximum impact, every pause calculated. He would have one chance to make humanity's position clear before the galaxy, one opportunity to frame the coming conflict as liberation rather than rebellion. And in Antarctica, Kale prepared for his final act. He spent hours interfacing with the precursor installation, learning its systems, understanding the terrible power he would soon wield. Dr. Lin monitored his vital signs and pretended not to notice when they showed stress patterns that indicated he fully understood he was preparing his own execution. "Do you regret it?" she asked him one evening as they sat in the observation room overlooking the installation. "Regret what?" Kale's translated voice asked. "Any of it. Fleeing the Council. Warning us, knowing that your choice will likely mean your death." Kyle was silent for a long moment. "I regret 47 years of cowardice. I regret every signature I placed on execution orders. I regret not finding my conscience sooner." He turned his eyeless head toward her. "But I do not regret this. If I must die, let it be while saving 8 billion lives instead of ending them. That seems like a fair trade." 3 days before Marcus departed for the Council headquarters, they conducted the final test of the precursor platform. Kale activated it at minimum power, just enough to confirm all systems were functional. For 30 seconds, the sky above Antarctica glowed with colors that did not exist in normal space. Gravitational sensors around the world went haywire, and deep space observation satellites detected energy signatures that made every physicist on Earth recalculate what they thought was possible. "It works," David said unnecessarily as they reviewed the data. "It works," Kale confirmed. "And at full power, it will erase any Council ship within range from existence. Not destroy them. Erase them, as if they never were." "How many ships can you target before the platform fails?" Holland asked. "Approximately 800 if I maintain full power throughout the engagement," Kale replied. "The platform will burn itself out." "And so will I. but 800 council ships, including any heavy command vessels, will simply cease to exist. Marcus arrived in Antarctica 2 days before his departure. He wanted to meet Kale face to face before the final act began. They stood together in the observation room, human and alien, looking at the ancient installation that would determine both their fates. "Thank you," Marcus said simply. "Thank me if humanity survives," Kale replied. "Thank me if the galaxy changes. Thank me if the Council's reign of hidden genocide finally ends." He paused. "And if I may ask something in return?" The data bomb struck the Galactic Information Network with the force of a supernova. Across 8,000 colonized worlds, on stations orbiting dying stars and habitats floating in the void between galaxies, billions of beings received the same compressed file. It bypassed government filters and corporate security systems with ease that suggested intimate knowledge of how those systems worked, because it had that knowledge. Kale had spent 47 years learning every secret the Council kept. The file contained 43 separate folders. Each one was dedicated to a specific species that currently served on the Council. Each folder held complete documentation of genetic manipulation programs, cultural conditioning protocols, technological suppression campaigns, historical revisionism on a massive scale. Each folder proved that species currently holding positions of authority in galactic government had once been targeted for elimination and instead had been transformed into something compliant and obedient. The first species to fully process the information was the Kelshan. Their folder revealed that 800 years earlier, their ancestors had possessed limited telepathic abilities and a fiercely individualistic culture. The Council had determined this made them resistant to social integration. A carefully engineered virus had stripped away the telepathy within 3 generations. Educational reforms implemented with Council advisors had gradually replaced individualism with collective thinking patterns. Within 5 generations, the Kelshan had become model citizens of the Compact, eager to serve and deeply loyal to Council authority. They had also become prisoners in minds that no longer remembered what freedom felt like. Within 6 hours of the data release, the Kelshan homeworld erupted into riots. Government buildings were stormed. Council representatives were expelled. Ancient genetic samples were pulled from archives and compared to current population baselines. The evidence was undeniable. Everything the data claimed was true. The Kelshan were not alone in their rage. The Tormek discovered their legendary warrior culture had been systematically dismantled through 5 centuries of peaceful education reforms that were anything but peaceful. The Jexari found proof that their species' famed religious devotion to Council authority had been engineered by operatives posing as prophets during their civilization's formative period. The Velkoth learned that their genetic predisposition toward obedience was not natural evolution, but deliberate manipulation imposed 900 years ago. Species after species learned the truth. Some collapsed into shocked paralysis. Some exploded into immediate violence. All demanded answers from a council that had none to give. In the Grand Assembly Hall, 43 council representatives were conspicuously absent. They were dealing with crises on their homeworlds. The remaining delegates drowned in accusation and counter-accusation. Protest transmissions flooded communication networks from across the galaxy. The carefully maintained illusion of benevolent governance was shattering in real time. But the 4 members of the First Council, those ancient species that had established galactic civilization 3,000 years ago, were not in the assembly hall. They had retreated to a secure chamber 3 kilometers beneath the Council's planetary headquarters. Security measures surrounding them could withstand planetary bombardment. They would need that protection. Supreme Arbiter. Thelnora's silver form flickered with barely restrained fury. Beside her sat Councillor Vexthar, his crimson scales bristling with aggression. High Curator Jelmar's crystalline structure refracted light into sharp patterns. Senior Architect Pelthon, whose species existed as patterns of quantum probability, manifested as pure energy that pulsed with anger. "The humans must be eliminated immediately," Vexthar growled. "Not tomorrow, not in 60 hours. Right now, we send the fleet. We glass their planet. We make an example so terrifying that no species will dare follow their lead." Hasty action created this disaster, Gelmar countered, her voice chiming like broken glass. We demanded the Velnoth fugitive. We threatened quarantine. We gave the humans time to prepare and leverage. Rushing to crush them now will only validate their accusations in the eyes of every watching species. The protocols are exposed, Pelthon's synthesized voice resonated. Not through hasty action, but through failure in our oversight. A Velnoth auditor developed a conscience. We did not anticipate that variable. Because it has never happened before, Thelnora said coldly. In 3,000 years, no auditor species has ever betrayed their function. The Velnoth are selected specifically for their emotional distance, their ability to witness suffering without flinching. Kale represents a statistical impossibility. An impossibility that may cost us everything we have built, Vexthar hissed. The galaxy is in flames. 43 species are in active rebellion. The protocols are public knowledge. Our authority is collapsing. If we do not demonstrate overwhelming power immediately, we lose control permanently. We will demonstrate power, Thelnora agreed. But we will do so intelligently. The enforcement fleet is already mobilizing. In 68 hours, 5,000 warships will arrive at Earth. The humans will be given one final opportunity to surrender the fugitive and submit to judgment. When they refuse, and they will refuse, we will show the galaxy what happens to species that threaten the order we have maintained. And the rebellious species? Gelmar asked. The Kelshan are already in open revolt. The Tormek have seized council facilities. The Jexari are broadcasting their grievances to every world that will listen. Examples will be made, Thelnora replied with chilling simplicity. The Kelshan first. A single demonstration of what happens to civilizations that forget their place. Then the Tormek. Then as many as necessary until the others remember why they accepted our guidance. Her form hardened into something cold and immovable. 3,000 years ago, we created the management protocols because we understood a fundamental truth. The galaxy cannot govern itself. Younger species wage destructive wars. They develop weapons that threaten all life. They expand without regard for ecological balance. We intervene not from cruelty, but from absolute necessity. The humans call it genocide, Pelthon observed without emotion. The humans are children playing with concepts beyond their comprehension, Thelnora said dismissively. They have been space-capable for mere decades. They have never witnessed what happens when aggressive species expand without oversight. They have never seen the wars that consumed entire sectors before we established order. She leaned forward, her silver form somehow conveying absolute conviction. In 68 hours, we will educate them. We will teach them and every other watching species that rebellion has consequences. That authority exists for reasons. That the price of galactic stability is obedience. While the First Council planned their response, Earth transformed into a fortress at a pace that terrified Council observers. General Holland stood in Unity Station's command center, watching holographic displays showing defensive positions throughout the solar system. Every moon of Jupiter now hosted weapons platforms. The asteroid belt had been seeded with automated defense drones that would activate when Council ships entered range. Saturn's rings concealed hunter-killer satellites. Even distant Neptune hosted early warning systems. It is impressive, Commander Elena Rodriguez said beside him. 7 months ago, we had commercial freighters and research vessels. Now we have a defense grid that might actually slow down a council fleet. Might being the critical word, Holland replied. Our weapons are untested in actual combat. Our crews have trained in simulations but have no real experience. And we are about to face an armada that has maintained galactic order for 3,000 years. The new weapon systems are still showing problems, a technician called out. Dr. Park's team reports interference in the quantum entanglement targeting protocols. Holland moved to the technician's console. David Park appeared on screen, looking like he had not slept in days. Behind him, the Antarctic research facility buzzed with desperate activity. What is the issue? Holland demanded. The issue is we are trying to weaponize technology we barely understand. David replied bluntly. Kale gave us the Council's quantum communication specifications. We adapted them into a coordination disruption system that should scramble their fleet's ability to operate in perfect synchronization. But the interference patterns are unpredictable. In our simulations, it works 70% of the time. And the other 30%? Our own systems crash, David admitted. We need more time to refine the protocols. Then I sincerely hope 70% is good enough. David's image flickered. General, I have been analyzing Council battle tactics based on Kale's data. They rely on overwhelming numerical superiority combined with precise fleet coordination. Every ship knows exactly what every other ship is doing. If we can disrupt that coordination, even partially, we change the nature of the engagement. From impossible to merely suicidal, Holland muttered. How many ships are we facing? Current intelligence suggests 5,000, Elena reported. 2,000 frontline battle cruisers, 1,500 destroyers, 1,000 support vessels, 500 heavy carriers. Their flagship is the Eternal Arbiter, 40 kilometers long. Orbital bombardment capabilities that could sterilize a continent in under an hour. The Council fleet entered the solar system like a constellation of angry stars. General Holland watched the tracking screens in Unity Station's command center as 5,000 warships materialized from hyperspace beyond Neptune's orbit. They came in perfect formation, a demonstration of 3,000 years of military precision. The sight alone was designed to inspire terror and hopelessness. Fleet composition confirmed, Elena Rodriguez reported, her voice steady despite the impossible odds. 2,000 battlecruisers, 1,500 destroyers, 1,000 support vessels, 500 heavy carriers, flagship Eternal Arbiter at the center of the formation. All defensive positions report ready, another officer called out. Earth orbital grid at full power. Lunar weapons platforms online. Mars installations tracking targets. Outer system positions acknowledging. Holland pulled up the tactical display. Humanity's 76 ships looked pathetically small against the incoming armada, but they were positioned strategically, ready to execute maneuvers that the Council had never encountered before, because no species had ever been desperate enough or innovative enough to try them. Status on the coordination disruption system? Holland asked. Charging now! David Park's voice crackled through the communication link from Antarctica. We will begin transmission the moment they cross Jupiter's orbit. Hoping for 70% effectiveness. Praying for more. Rachel Torres stood beside Holland, her face pale but determined. Beside her, Dr. Lin monitored displays showing the precursor installation's power levels. And somewhere deep beneath the Antarctic ice, Kale was already interfacing with the ancient platform. His consciousness merging with technology older than human civilization. The Council fleet advanced steadily. They showed no hesitation, no concern about the defensive preparations they could clearly observe. Why would they? They had 5,000 ships against 76. They had weapons refined over millennia against systems barely tested. They had absolute confidence in their superiority. That confidence was about to be tested. A new transmission filled every screen in the command center. Supreme Arbiter Thelnora appeared, her silver form radiating cold authority. When she spoke, her voice carried to every human facility in the solar system. Humans of Earth, you have made your position clear. You have rejected our authority. You have harbored a fugitive. You have exposed confidential information and caused chaos throughout galactic civilization. We offered you mercy through quarantine. You responded with defiance and threats. Her form hardened. Therefore, in accordance with compact law, you are now designated a hostile entity. This system will be cleansed of your presence. Let all civilizations watching understand that this is the consequence of rebellion. This is what happens when young species forget their place. This is the price of defying order. The transmission ended. The fleet accelerated toward Earth. All defensive positions, Holland ordered, his voice carrying to every human ship and installation in the solar system. Engage at will. Show them what humanity does when threatened with extinction. Show them why they were right to fear us. The Council fleet reached Neptune's orbit. Humanity's outer defense grid activated instantly. Mines hidden in the ice rings detonated with precisely calculated timing. Shrapnel tore through the tightly packed formation. 6 destroyers vanished in brilliant explosions. More importantly, the blasts forced the Council fleet to spread out, disrupting their perfect coordination. Quantum disruption system activating, David announced. Transmitting now. Invisible waves of quantum interference cascaded across the Council fleet. Ships that had operated in perfect synchronization for 3,000 years suddenly found their communication networks scrambled. Fleet-wide coordination protocols failed. Individual vessels lost contact with command authority. The formation that had entered the solar system as a unified force began to fragment into separate groups, operating on outdated orders. Disruption effectiveness at 82%, a technician shouted with disbelief. It is working better than predicted, but 5,000 ships were still 5,000 ships. Even disrupted and damaged, even forced to operate with reduced coordination, the Council Armada pressed forward. They were professional soldiers who had maintained galactic order for millennia. A few setbacks would not stop them. They reached Uranus, where humanity's fast attack ships waited. What followed was brutal and desperate. Human vessels, smaller and faster than their opponents, struck and fled in patterns the Council had never encountered. They used the gas giant's gravity well for impossible maneuvers. They deployed weapons that combined Council technology with human innovation in ways that should not work, but somehow did. One human destroyer, the Resolution, exhausted its weapons and deliberately rammed a Council battlecruiser at full velocity. Both ships exploded. Another vessel, the Resilience, detonated its reactor while surrounded by enemy ships, taking 17 destroyers with it in a fusion blast that briefly rivaled a small star. Humanity fought like cornered animals. They used tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They took risks that no rational commander would accept. And slowly, impossibly, the Council fleet's advance began to cost them more than anticipated. By the time they reached Saturn, 400 Council ships had been destroyed. By Jupiter, the number climbed to 800. It was not enough against 5,000, but every destroyed vessel created debris fields that forced the fleet to maneuver. Every loss spread uncertainty through crews that had expected an easy victory. "They are still coming," Elena reported unnecessarily. Everyone could see the displays. 4,200 Council ships advancing through the wreckage of their own vessels. Still more than enough to overwhelm every defense humanity possessed. "Precursor platform status?" Holland asked, knowing what the answer would cost. Deep in Antarctica, Kale rested in a chamber filled with technology that had been ancient when Earth's continents were still forming. Neural interface cables connected directly to his crystalline nervous system. Around him, power levels rose to values that made human instruments scream with overload warnings. "I am ready," Kale's voice came through the speakers, already sounding strained from the neural load. "General, when I activate at full power, I will have approximately 30 minutes before complete system failure. Both the platform and myself. Use that time well." "We will," Holland promised. "And Kale, humanity will never forget what you are about to do." "Then make sure humanity survives to remember," Kyle replied. "Activating now." The sky above Antarctica suddenly blazed with light that should not exist in normal space. Colors that human eyes were not designed to perceive painted the atmosphere. Every gravitational sensor on Earth went haywire. Deep space observation satellites detected energy signatures that made physicists question fundamental laws of physics. And in orbit, 800 Council ships simply ceased to exist. They were not destroyed. They were not atomized. They were erased at a quantum level, removed from reality as thoroughly as if they had never been built. One moment they were there, proud vessels of a 3,000-year-old empire. The next moment they were gone. Not even debris remained. Supreme Arbiter Thelnora had 3 seconds to understand what was happening to her flagship. 3 seconds to realize that humans had found something the Council had spent 3,000 years trying to suppress. 3 seconds to comprehend that every fear about young species had been justified. Then she was gone. The Eternal Arbiter ceased to exist. The Supreme Arbiter, who had governed for 12,000 years, simply stopped being. The Council fleet recoiled in absolute shock. They had come expecting to fight primitives with barely functional technology. Instead, they had just witnessed weapons that made their most advanced systems look like children's toys. More than that, they had just lost their command structure. Their coordination was already disrupted. Now their leadership was simply gone. "All remaining Council vessels," General Holland transmitted, his voice cold and hard. "You have 30 seconds to retreat beyond Mars orbit, or we will activate the weapon again." It was a calculated bluff. Kale was already dying. his biological systems burning from the neural feedback of channeling more power than any Veilnoth was meant to survive. The precursor platform was melting, its ancient systems pushed beyond operational limits. Both would be completely non-functional within 20 minutes, but the Council did not know that. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Council fleet broke and ran. 3,000 ships turned and retreated. Their formation shattered, their command structure decapitated, their absolute confidence in their superiority destroyed by humans who had been in space for barely 20 years. Humanity's remaining ships, 19 vessels that had somehow survived the desperate running battle, held position around Earth. They were damaged and exhausted but victorious. The impossible had happened. Earth had survived. In Antarctica, alarms screamed as the precursor installation began its final collapse. Dr. Lin worked frantically at medical monitors, her hands shaking as she tried to stabilize Kyle's failing systems. "Kyle!" she called desperately. "Kyle, can you hear me?" "I hear you," came the faint reply, barely audible through translation speakers that were themselves failing. "Did humanity survive?"